Fashion's history is a kaleidoscope of trends, each making a fleeting but impactful appearance. Despite our familiarity with contemporary styles, historical fashion boasts numerous odd, impractical, and extreme trends. Welcome to Cinema.Fashion channel. In this episode, we delve into 10 of the most bizarre historical trends. Did men once don corsets? Did Roman women use Gladiator Sweat for facial care? Were living ornaments in fashion, using actual living creatures as adornments? Let's find out.
She ain't ready for the eighth. He be riding on the wave. I ain't got a lot to say. Mine's heavy, give me space. Time's ready, let me blaze. Spend money, what a waste. Time's money, money pays. You ain't ready for the eighth. She ain't ready for the
Corsets are normally associated with tiny waists, curvaceous hourglass figures, and fainting Victorian women. But this underwear was not worn by women alone. The dandyism era, spanning late 18th to early 19th century, marked a significant milestone in European men's fashion, especially in Great Britain. Dandies aimed to emulate the lifestyle of the aristocracy, prioritizing physical aesthetics. Their emphasis on quality tailoring served to enhance their natural bodies under stylish attire. A dandy typically employed numerous methods to accentuate his physique, often opting for styles that highlighted feminine features. If he wasn't slender enough, his underwear might include corsets and special pads elsewhere to enhance his chest, shoulders, thighs, shins, and buttocks. In the era of European dandyism, the trend wasn't universally accepted. Satirists often targeted dandies, representing their fashion as a sign of bourgeois excess, femininity, and homosexuality. Contemporary critics view this trend as possibly driven by early consumer capitalism's metrosexual expression. 19th century British humor further stoked the Anglo-French rivalry by stereotyping French dandies as slender and discontent, in contrast to the hearty masculinity of well-nourished Englishmen. Naomi Wolf, in her 1991 publication, The Beauty Myth, postulated that Western beauty standards served as a tool to impede women's progress. This concept was even more pertinent in medieval society, where beauty and morality were intertwined. An ideal Gothic beauty was often pregnant, or at least appeared so by wearing belly pads, a trend which proved detrimental to women's health due to the physical strain of constant childbirth and injuries caused by the heavy padding. This prompts the question, why was this the case? During the early Middle Ages, the Church had a significant influence, leading to the prominence of the Virgin Mary. This period saw a preference for characteristics associated with pregnancy and breastfeeding, resulting in an S-shaped, ideal, feminine figure. The focus was on natural beauty, as cosmetics and personal hygiene were largely disregarded due to their association with sinfulness and temptation. This notion was primarily rooted in biblical narratives, particularly the comparison of the Virgin Mary's purity to Eve's perceived disorderliness. Throughout the centuries, fashion has often been used as a political statement, and women's bloomers are no exception. In the early 1850s, New York women's rights activist Amelia Jenks Bloomer initiated a new political trend. She proposed that women should exchange the uncomfortable Victorian style for rational dress. The entire outfit, called the bloomer costume, or simply bloomers, consisted of a short jacket, a knee-length skirt, and loose Turkish trousers or pants gathered at the ankles. Victorian males viewed bloomers as a threat to societal norms and patriarchal power. These Turkish trousers were a fleeting fashion trend, yet the term bloomers survived. Nowadays, it denotes both baggy pants of Turkish design and the baggy silhouettes of women's underclothes. The codpiece, a garment of the past, had a dual function. It served to both conceal and emphasize the male genitalia, a part often left unmentioned in polite society. The French philosopher Michel de Montaigne in the 1580s described it as an empty and useless model of a member that we cannot even decently mention by name, which, however, we show off and parade in public. The codpiece's inception was rooted in the intent to preserve a man's modesty, and its evolution into a standalone fashionable item was primarily due to practicality. During the 16th century in Europe, societal norms were heavily influenced by concepts of masculinity, including chivalry, honor, and romanticism. In the historical context, codpieces were a symbol of masculinity and military prowess. They were particularly popular among German and Swiss mercenaries for their practical function in safeguarding their most vulnerable body part during combat. By the mid-16th century, codpieces had become a fashion statement. They were made of rich silk velvet and adorned with gold embroidery and precious stones, demonstrating the wealth and status of kings and the affluent. One of the reasons for the radical increase in the size of the codpiece was the spread of syphilis, as the symptoms caused by the disease would be almost impossible to conceal if you were wearing tight trousers. During the 1700s to 1800s, Europe's affluent class briefly favored an obscure art form, the eye miniature. Often worn as jewelry, its popularity surged due to a clandestine romance involving King George IV of England and a commoner, Maria Fitzherbert. In the year 1785, Maria Anne Fitzherbert received a passionate correspondence from her suitor, Prince George of Wales, which unexpectedly contained an intense eye portrait. The British prince was lovesick and desperate. He'd fallen hard for Fitzherbert, but their courtship had been disastrous. Royal laws forbade a Catholic widow like his beloved from becoming a monarch. To make matters worse, the upstanding Fitzherbert had fled the country after the prince's first proposal in an attempt to avoid controversy. But the prince was determined, and on November 3rd, he penned a passionate letter begging again for her hand in marriage. This was no ordinary proposal, though. It also contained a rare, spellbinding gift. "I send you a parcel," George wrote in the letter's postscript, "and I send you at the same time an eye." Despite intense disapproval from the royal court, the two married in secret and commissioned portraits of their eyes as secret tokens of affection. In the late 18th century England, eye miniatures, or lovers' eyes, became popular. They originated around 1785, and their popularity lasted for almost 50 years. These precious pieces of art, often exchanged between loved ones as tokens of affection, were painted on small pieces of ivory. Some were commissioned in memory of a deceased loved one. Some, too, were painted in memory of the deceased. All were intimate and exceedingly precious. Eyes painted on bits of ivory no bigger than a pinky nail, then set inside ruby-garlanded brooches, pearl-encrusted rings, or ornate golden charms meant to be tucked into pockets or pinned close to the heart. Sometime during the 12th century, rich people across Europe decided that their hands were a bit too free for someone with a lot of money, as it could be mistaken for having a job or other peasant pursuits. To drive the point home, they started wearing clothes with really long sleeves, which would eventually develop into what we now know as bleats. Long, floor-reaching sleeves and tight waists characterized outfits in the 12th century, with regional variations. In Germany, the preference was for bleats, loose at the waist and tightened with a belt, and sleeves widening near the wrists. In contrast, Polish styles had sleeves broadening from the elbows and a more relaxed waist fit. This fashion trend, lasting 50 years, left a lasting impact on European style for centuries. In the 1890s, a unique trend emerged in the United States. Women began using live lizards as fashion accessories. These lizards, marketed as chameleons, were said to change color to match the wearer's outfit. The lizards were fitted with small collars and chains and attached to brooches, scarves, or even worn in the hair. In an effort to safeguard chameleons, the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals took action, resulting in a New York citywide ban on reptile sales. Despite this ban, lizards continued to be used as decorative hair brooches until the 1920s. By the latter half of the 20th century, this trend had largely faded, with non-living butterfly accessories becoming the preferred choice. Paper dresses were a huge, even if short-lived fashion trend in the 1960s, and they were exactly what they sound like. Made only with a type of paper, these dresses were popularized by brands like the Scott Paper Company and Kleenex as they tried to cash in on the sustainability trend of the time. Of course, these dresses were marketed with over-the-top hype and elaborate advertising campaigns, while doing nothing to solve the inherent problem of making clothes with paper. While they were inexpensive and disposable, making them appealing to young women looking for trendy and affordable fashion options, they were also wildly impractical. Apart from being prone to tearing at all the inappropriate moments, these dresses were hardly meant for the wear and tear of everyday life. The trend fizzled out soon enough, though paper dresses were still worn as statement pieces at parties and other social events throughout the 60s. In today's world, boots aren't exactly a common footwear choice for most people. Aside from historical reenactors, they're primarily worn by individuals with outdoor jobs that require them to contend with specific weather conditions and limited opportunities to take breaks indoors. Some wear them purely for fun. Beyond weather considerations, there are few practical reasons for this type of footwear today. However, historical accounts reveal that boots were once incredibly popular and worn by nearly everyone, regardless of their profession. This may seem like an odd fashion trend from the past, but it had a very practical purpose. Back then, streets were often littered with horse manure, as horses were the primary mode of transportation. While some cities had better sanitation practices than others, complete cleanliness was nearly impossible. Additionally, drainage systems were often inadequate, and during storms or sewage backups, having boots was essential. In ancient Rome, Gladiator Sweat was highly prized for its supposed beauty and aphrodisiac properties. Gladiator Sweat was collected, mixed with olive oil, and sold in small glass vials. Women used it as a facial cream, believing it would enhance their complexion. The sweat was gathered using a tool known as a strigil, which was used to scrape the sweat and grime from a gladiator's body. Additionally, both men and women consumed gladiator sweat and blood mixed with wine, considering it a potent aphrodisiac. I hope I managed to pique your interest and maybe even bring a little joy. Which trend do you find the most outrageous? And what modern fashion craze would you happily see fade into history? Share your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing your feedback. Also, I'd be grateful if you subscribe to this channel and hit the bell so you won't miss the latest videos. For now, I'll be signing off. Thanks for your attention, and bye-bye.